Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing my August wrap up. I had to take a second there to think about what month it was. Couple things first, I've changed this room around a bit since I last filmed, so yeah, it's looking a little different. And then also I'm going to be announcing the winner of my Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue giveaway at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that as well because that's super exciting. But anyway, getting into the books that I read this month. Last month I split it into like the best books and the worst books. I just didn't read enough books to do that. This month I think I only read 4. Yeah, I read 4 books this month, so I'm doing it all in one video. But as usual, I'm going to go from my lowest rating to my highest rating. And this month I had 2 3-star books and 2 5-star books. So the first 3-star book that I read this month was Brag Woman Brag by Jonathan Kislev. This is a non-fiction like self-help type of book, and it's targeted towards women, and it's all about believing in yourself and kind of having confidence in yourself. It's full of a bunch of different stuff. So there's different sort of stories, whether they're Jonathan's own stories or from other people. There are exercises to do, there are affirmations, there are bragging techniques, which, believe it or not, they were actually really good. So there were a few things I liked about this book and a few things that I didn't like about it, as is generally the case with books that I rate 3 stars. 3 stars for me means that like I enjoyed a book, but there were just a few things that I didn't like about it. So the first thing that I really liked, as I mentioned before, were the bragging techniques. There's like 4 or 5 ideas that Jonathan gives about how you can brag in a way that isn't, because you know, you think of bragging and you think like, I don't want to brag about something because you don't want to sound like you're conceited or something, but he gives ideas of like how you can brag kind of subtly so that you're giving yourself, you know, the props that you deserve, but you're not being a jerk about it or like being weird, and people aren't gonna like think, you know, what are you doing? I also really liked his focus on internalized misogyny. So he talks a bit about overcoming that and not like believing in those things that are kind of ingrained into you without you knowing it. I also like his confronting of gender roles, because he talks a lot about how women can be strong, which is, you know, traditionally, you know, what men are, and also that men can be emotional as well, and that's something that kind of gets missed out sometimes. So I think that was really cool that he included that acknowledgement of, you know, breaking out of gender roles. One of the things, probably the major one that I didn't like, was the fact that this is all about women working on themselves so that they can have more opportunities in a quite misogynistic world. I like that, but at the same time I would have liked to have seen some acknowledgement at least of the fact that no matter how strong you are as a woman, and no matter how much you do believe in yourself, actually it's the external world as well that limits what we're able to do. So just would have liked to see that acknowledged. And then there were a few little things that just bothered me, no big deal, but one thing was that Jonathan uses like smileys, you know, when you do like a semicolon with a bracket to do a smiley, he uses that a few times throughout the book, which just kind of took me out of it, because you don't expect to see that in a book that isn't just someone like using, you know, text language or whatever. So I didn't expect to see that in a non-fiction book, and it just made me feel like he perhaps wasn't confident in his ability to portray a particular tone, because sometimes he'd say something like quite lighthearted and he wants you to know that he's like teasing or making a joke, so he'll put a smiley at the end, but I just think they weren't needed because he did a great job of portraying the tone as it was. You really didn't need the smileys to, you know that he was kidding or whatever. The other thing was that Oprah gets a lot of mentions, because a lot of the stories he gives, you know, of women's experiences he got from watching Oprah, and I really didn't like that, because he had a lot of his own examples from women he knew or women he'd met, and I don't think he needed Oprah's stories. I think his stories were a lot better. Also along similar lines, he put in his own personal anecdotes, which I get why you do that, because it's nice to throw in your own personal experience, but when you're writing a non-fiction book targeted at women and focusing on their experiences, I just felt like Jonathan, like as much as he could offer, you know, advice and like this is what I've been through or whatever, I just feel like it was a bit irrelevant to the subject matter, and it just felt a little bit weird. So overall I really liked this book in terms of it's encouraging you to build self-confidence and things like that, but I just would have liked it better, I think, if it hadn't been targeted at women, because there's no reason why the tips in this can't apply to men as well. So I feel like it would have just been better as a book that's like brag, human brag, you know. The next 3-star book that I read this month was The Spy by Paulo Coelho. This was sent to me by Jayesh. We did a book swap like a month or two ago. I'll link Jayesh's channel down below because he is another awesome booktuber. He does travel videos and stuff as well, and I really enjoyed this book, so thank you Jayesh again for sending this to me. This is a historical fiction novel based on the true story of a woman called Matahari. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of her. I hadn't heard of her, but it was really interesting to learn a bit about her life. Basically, it's set around the time just before World War II. Matahari was a woman who had kind of like a tough life, and she ended up as an exotic dancer, and then she ended up getting executed for like being a spy or something coming into the war, which is insane. So it's kind of just the story about what happened leading up to her death. As you can imagine, it was a super intriguing story and really interesting. I think she's a fascinating woman who had like a really interesting life. I really liked the writing style in this book. It's like super simplistic, which made it a breeze to get through. So I really want to read more of this author's work, just because I really liked the writing style, so I think anything else I would probably enjoy as well. The only thing that I didn't like about this book was that it's told in first person from Matahari's point of view. She comes across extremely narcissistic, and I don't know if that's intentional because she was that narcissistic in real life and that was like a well-known thing. I don't know much about Matahari, like I only know what I've read in this book, so I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but there's moments where she says things like you know, I was the prettiest woman in the room, all that kind of thing, just blatantly like saying stuff that just comes across really unappealing and really unattractive, and I just really didn't like her character. I don't know if she was like that in real life. This book does a really good job of explaining the events that happen and stuff, so I was really into the plot, but I don't think it does a great job of you know, with the characterization. I think that could have been a lot better. I just felt like her character wasn't very convincing, but the plot was amazing. So moving into the 5-star books that I read this month, the first one was a reread for me, which is The Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. I hadn't read this book since I was a kid, so it was really fun to pick it up again, and I enjoyed it so much. I was kind of worried that I wouldn't love it as much as I did when I was a kid, but I love this book so much, so it's totally 5 stars for me. So this is the first book in a trilogy, his Dark Materials trilogy. It's a children's fantasy book, but it's one of those books that has so many layers to it that, you know, as a child you kind of read it as this somewhat straightforward fantasy story. Like, it's not totally straightforward because it is very confusing and it has a reputation for being a very complex story, but I feel like as a kid you can read it and basically understand what's going on, and you know, hook on to things that you really love about it. But as an adult there are so many, you know, subtexts and things like that going on, all these, you know, discussions and ideas being thrown about, that as an adult reading it you gain so much more out of it. So I think that's, you know, a writer has a lot of skill when they can do a book like this that appeals to both types of audiences. This first book follows a girl called Lyra. I think she's about 11 years old or something like that. Lyra is an orphan, so she's living at like a college, a university with a whole bunch of scholars. All humans have what they call a demon. It's spelt differently to demon because, you know, they're not like demons, but in my head I pronounce it daemon because that's how it looks like it's spelt, but it's basically like an externalized version of your soul, kind of. So everyone has like an animal that is like a external projection of their soul, so it's like you have constant like friendship and company with you all the time. Kids start going missing, and Lyra, one of her best friends, goes missing, so she wants to go to the north, which is like, you know, the Arctic and all that. She wants to go to the north to find him and find out what's happened to him. Lyra basically goes on this big adventure, and it's super intense. This book, by the way, in other countries is called The Golden Compass. The Golden Compass is an alethiometer or an althiometer. I say althiometer, but it doesn't look like it's pronounced that way. It's interesting when you read things as a kid, your pronunciation is like whack, and when I go back to read it as an adult I can't get that pronunciation out of my head. So like daemon instead of demon, and althiometer instead of alethiometer, or whatever it's meant to be. But yeah, it's basically a symbol reader she has, Lyra has, that she can ask it a question. It basically tells her an answer. And I just remember as a kid wishing that I had a demon and wishing that I had an althiometer, because they just seem like the coolest things on the planet. So it's one of those books where you read it as a kid, like Harry Potter, and you just wish you could be a part of this world. As an adult, there were more things I noticed that I hadn't picked up on as a kid, and one of them is that Lyra is a really unreliable narrator, she lies through her teeth all the time. She tells the tallest of tales, and she'll tell one story to one person, then she'll tell it to someone else completely different. There were also elements of the story that I found like super horrific that I guess it doesn't really like hit you as much when you're a kid, or you don't really think about it that much. So yeah, that was interesting as well. And then the other thing is that a lot of people say this book has like a reputation of being anti-Christian because Philip Pullman is known as an atheist, and obviously the church, or like they're directly referred to as Christians in this book, they're like the bad guy, so it is kind of like in your face against Christianity, I'm not gonna lie. But Christians and the church in this book, it's like a fantasy world, and they're completely different to actual Christianity. But apparently it does get more intense in the next couple books, so we'll see, because I haven't read them since I was a kid either, so I don't remember that much about it. And it's that kind of stuff that doesn't really affect you as a kid. You don't really think about it, you just read it and you know that it's fake, you know. So yeah, the final book I read this month, which was also 5 stars for me, and highly recommend this, it was incredible. I'd seen it recommended everywhere on the internet. Finally thought like I have to read this book because everyone recommends it, and that is The Total Money Makeover, A Proven Plan for Financial Fitness by Dave Ramsey. This is not the kind of thing I would normally read at all. I have no interest in finance, and I think a lot of non-fiction self-help books relating to finance are kind of same. Like most of it, as Dave Ramsey often says, is total common sense. So if you do feel like you have a good level of financial health, like you don't have problems with dealing with money or anything like that, and you have like a long-term plan of how your life is gonna plan out in regards to your finances, then you probably don't need this book. But for someone like me who feels like, oh, library receipt, for someone like me, I feel like this book is exactly what I needed. It's a step-by-step plan, but it also gives you in-depth knowledge about like how to budget, you know, how to go about things like paying off debt, how to go about saving for a house deposit or paying off a house, how to, you know, save for your future children's education, how to save for your retirement, like all these kinds of things, but in a very step-by-step plan. And I now feel like I have a financial plan for the rest of my life, and I'm going to be all set. And it's kind of things that I thought that I wouldn't be able to achieve in my lifetime. I feel like Dave Ramsey lays it out in a way that you can literally look at, you know, the numbers and you can see that it is actually very possible. He gives advice as well as a lot of like factual information, but he has a really personable voice, which I think is really important in non-fiction. I'm definitely implementing all of these things into my life because I feel like it will completely change my life, and I'm gonna keep you guys updated with how it's working for me and things like that. I'd like to do like a full-on review of this book, but I feel like it would be better to do a review of it in terms of how it actually impacts my life and things like that. So I feel like when I'm getting somewhere with it, I'll update you guys and like do a review. But I think that's an interesting thing I might start doing with non-fiction books, is reviewing them based on how they've implemented into my life kind of thing. But yeah, I really recommend this book. I did get it out from the library, but I think I'll definitely be purchasing it in future because it's the kind of thing you can go back to throughout your entire life for advice, and it's awesome. So now to announce the giveaway winner. I did a giveaway for The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. I used random.org to generate a winner. I basically put the comments all in order from like newest comment to oldest comment and picked a random number and then scrolled down the list and picked that number comment. The winner was Yasmin from Yasmin's Bookshelf. So yay Yasmin, you won the book. I have sent a message to you, Yasmin, so if you can just reply if you haven't already with your address so that I can post the book out to you. But Yasmin, her channel was called Yasmin's Bookshelf, and she's just in the last couple of weeks started uploading videos, so if you want to check out her channel I will link it down below as well. And yeah, thank you guys all for entering that, it was really fun. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this, and I'll see you with another video in a couple days. Bye.